Welcome back to Thriving in Business and Life. This is Will Wilkinson.
And this is Christopher Harding. Last week, Will, we kind of jumped into the whole idea of vision and imagination. We talked about how, the best visioning process as we've played with it is kind of almost like putting yourself into the future in your imagination and looking back at it as if the goal or achievement you were trying to go after is already done.
Yeah, and I think we made some comments about the limitations of some of the terms we're using, for instance, visioning and looking back. For some people, it's more difficult to use that capacity than others. So it's important that we emphasize we're talking about a felt experience of something that we're using our imagination to create. Now, some people who are visual, I happen to be visual, it's pretty easy for me to get an actual picture of what it is I'm thinking of. Other people, my wife, not so much visual. For her, it's more kinesthetic, so she wants to know how it would feel, particularly how it would feel in her body. So I think this is an important distinction to make as we go deeper into this whole matter, that this is about a felt experience, not just seeing.
Right. And so, it's using the imagination, right, we could say, to project ourselves into the future and to sense it, I think is one of the ways we talked about it. For some people, it might be, what are they hearing? Or, what are they smelling? What are the smells in the restaurant where they're celebrating what's already happened and so forth. And one of the things we explored, too, is that not instead of, but definitely in addition to larger long-term visions, we use this technique for something that's about to happen today. We're going to go make a presentation, or we're going to have a meeting with somebody, and we project ourselves into the future and say, wow, that was so great. I'm so glad that things went well. I'm really feeling good about it. And we maybe even imagine things that were said, where we are when we're celebrating or enjoying what accomplished. That there's a term, and there's actually a chapter in our book, Thriving in Business and Life, that really was driven out of your experience and your practice with your clients, and it combines two terms: vision first, results now. So talk about, first of all, why vision first, and then we'll get into what does that mean, results now.
Well, the simplest metaphor that we've employed is driving. That when we're driving, it makes sense to look through the windshield, right? Because we'd like to know where we're going. If you take your eyes off the windshield, you can have an accident. So similarly in life, it's important to know where we're going. Again, using the term vision and expanding it beyond just seeing, it's important to pay attention to where we're going. Where are we heading? So when we say vision first, that may sound exotic. Really, it's a reminder to watch where we're going.
Right, and basically have an intent in mind. Here's what I intend to create or generate or have happen.
Yes, and again, this may sound provocative. It's natural. I mean, if I walk out of my front door, usually I'm going somewhere. And if I'm conscious of where I'm going, I'll know whether to turn left or turn right. Now, a complaint a lot of people have is that they feel aimless. Very interesting term. They don't have any aim. It's kind of, meandering through life. It's been proven that in terms of both success and happiness, people who focus their intention and have a clear idea of where they want to head get much better results. So when we say vision first, it's really all we're talking about is being clear, conscious about your intention.
Well, you used the word aimless, and I think it's curious, perhaps, if to ask ourselves, as we go throughout a day, how aimless or aimed, focused am I when I go into, whether it be an office setting or a store if it's where I work, or I'm working in a family setting, whatever it is. Do I have a real clear intent about what I am going to create that day? We've talked about story in the past, and so part of this process is, what do I want to create today? What's the environment, the outcome, the feeling, the sense of rapport and relationship that I want to create? If I don't go about that consciously, I'm pretty much going to be reacting almost like a pinball to the different bumpers in my life that send me this way and that.
Well, it would be easy for someone listening to think, oh, this is an interesting technique. I'd like to try that out. Or, I don't have time for that. The point we want to make is that we are already doing this unconsciously.
Right.
We may not have a conscious intent, but when we walk into the office in the morning, there is programming running. Like, oh, what have I experienced for the last 10 years walking through this door conditions me to what I'm expecting, even though I'm not consciously aware of it.
Autopilot, basically.
I'm on autopilot, and the process we're describing is happening without our conscious participation. What we're encouraging people to do, and we're working with ourselves, first of all, is to become conscious about this process and choose what we intend to happen.
There's studies been done now that they're able to really have live MRIs and study, different parts of the brain, realizing that it's estimated that up to 95% of our decision making is done unconsciously.
Right.
And then we become aware of the decision, and it kind of goes to the autopilot thing. The programming is so strong. So I guess what we're saying is that wouldn't it be great if we were able to change that equation to 90 or 85 or 80 to where we're very conscious about what we're doing and why and what we're aiming for.
And it really starts, in many cases, with simply asking a question, a disruptive question that interrupts the programming. A story you've heard me tell, who knows if this is true or not, it's a good story. A young girl's helping her mother in the kitchen. They're baking a ham.
Right.
And the girl says, Mommy, why do you always cut both ends off the ham before you bake it? I said, I'm not sure. My mother always did that. Let's ask her. They asked Grandma, and she goes, I'm not sure. My mother always did that. Great-grandmother is still around. They asked her, and she said, oh, well, the pan's too small. Now, that's a totally perfect example of what we're talking about here. The mother picked up something from her mother, who picked up something from her mother, and was repeating a program all through the years that didn't make any sense whatsoever. Finally, the little girl asks the question, why are you doing that? That can be as easy as it is to break through our unconscious programming, just to say, well, why am I doing this?
Well, along with it, we've been playing with a new app that we're in the process of early stage development, and one of the questions we ask in the app is, what do you want today?
Yeah.
And that, in a way, that's a disruptive question as well, because it brings into our consciousness, what do I want to create? What do I want today? And to get intentional about it. And so I love the example you gave, because if you think about it, there was a story, an unconscious story, that the ham has to be cut off in a certain way. That was the story.
Right.
There was a bias that is the correct way to do it, right?
An unquestioned bias.
Yeah, an unquestioned bias. And you start to think about, what are the values I am unconsciously bringing into my day as well? Well, all those things can be approached consciously once we ask the question, what do I want? And set out to create a vision that actually intentionally is going after that. So vision first, like you said, we're always doing it unconsciously, right. And what we're suggesting is let's get intentional about it.
And Chris, I was writing on this for our app yesterday on this very topic, and found myself penning something I hadn't really articulated quite the way I did in just this one simple sentence. I think I posed the question that you just posed, so what do you want today? And as I read that, I realized that it was impossible to really answer, because today was a theory. Today was a concept. What did today mean? Like, when does today start? When does today end?
What do you want right now?
Yeah, I realized that for this formula to work, it has to get far more specific. What do I want from this meeting with Jane at 12:30?
Right.
What do I want from my commute into work, where I'm sitting in my car for 30 minutes? What do I want from dinner with my wife tonight at 7 o'clock at our favorite restaurant? And as I was writing, I realized that to really help people adopt this conscious habit, we need to encourage them to get very granular and very specific rather than general, what do I want from today? That's kind of paralyzing. Well, I'd like it to be a good day. I'd like to be happy, successful. Fine. But what do I want from one little thing after another?
Yeah, I like that. That's and we've really pulled the idea of what could be called visioning or creating the future into that more granular state, rather than looking at a big, hairy, audacious goal, which are fine, but bringing it down to the now.
Well, and also we're really encouraging people to get very honest about what they want. Another thing I found myself writing was that it's okay to be selfish. And as I wrote that, I went, really? Is it okay? As my own programming kicked in, and I realized, and that was my next sentence, that if we don't get in touch with what we want, we're going to show up with a hidden agenda. Because we do want something.
Yeah.
We always do. If we're not conscious about it, facing it, acknowledging it, maybe adjusting it, then we're carrying in something that we want that we haven't acknowledged, but other people will feel.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before, but my wife has done brainstorming work. She calls it doing a brain splurge with people. And one of the first things she does before they begin the actual process is first everybody to write down the agenda of what are the 2 or 3 things they came in hoping that they would get from the meeting. Right. And to write those and actually put them up on the table and declare them so that everybody knows what everybody else wants. Yeah. And then we can decide whether those agenda items are more important than what we're actually going for.
Yeah, and what a great way to begin.
Yeah,
I love that.
Because it like you said, it just brings up into our conscious mind what was maybe an agenda that we had even hidden from ourselves.
Yeah.
There's a lyric, I think it's a Billy Joel song, that says, if you don't do what's right for you, you're no good for anybody.
Well, I love that, and it helps expose the fallacy of altruism, where, people will say, well, I just want to help other people, I want to help the world. Wonderful, and I know most of us feel that way, but we also want something for ourselves. And, the metaphor that I often return to is that simple instruction on the airplane. When you're watching the safety video.
Yeah, put on your own oxygen mask first.
Exactly, because if I don't put on my own oxygen mask first, I'm unable to help my young daughter who's sitting next to me. It may be altruistic. Oh, I want to help her first. Well, if I'm not able to help her, she's not going to benefit from my altruism. So I think there's a step here in, considering what we call vision first, to really acknowledge that we all have valid wants and needs, and that it's only beneficial to get in touch with them. Once we do that, we may, there may be some kind of shock. Like, really? I really want that? We might adjust them, but until we're willing to face them, we're just being unconscious and we're meandering through our lives.
Yeah. It's an exercise in and of itself, and I think, flashing back to a Zen teacher that I had at one point that was quoting an earlier Zen master who said that the most egotistical thing we could ever do was try to get rid of the ego.
Right, because who's doing that?
Right. And what would be the reason why, right? To look more saintly or enlightened or whatever it might be. So as we look at the idea of, getting clear on what we want, being intentional even in a granular sense, realizing we're not going to do it all the time. There will be times when we're on autopilot, and that's okay. The real question is, were the results, did it turn out the way you had hoped? Did it turn out productively? Right. If it didn't, then that calls my attention to the fact that, wow, I need to be more intentional about this. So we're not suggesting that you have to, be an absolute, eccentric person about constantly being conscious, though maybe that wouldn't be so eccentric if we were all doing it.
Well, I mean, it's the first part of this equation, being conscious about what we want, putting vision first, looking through the windshield, knowing where we're going, etc. The second part is results now.
Yeah, so the first time I heard you use that term, I wasn't sure what you meant, and then I started to get a sense that if I'm doing this process that we've described, where I'm projecting myself into the future and I'm feeling what it feels like to have already achieved success, then I'm experiencing a, quote, future success right now in my body.
Right. Well, the simplest way I have of describing this relates to sports, because you have some measurements. You win or you lose. And for me, it's always discouraging to watch athletes playing who are so focused on winning the game that they're no longer having any fun. And this tends to happen at the professional level, where there's millions of dollars at stake in every moment, etc. But my experience, both watching teams where they remember that they're playing a game and that they can have fun while they're playing the game, and my own playing, whether it's golf or basketball. I played a lot of hockey when I was a kid, played a lot of tennis. Whenever that results now experience is happening, namely, I'm enjoying myself right now, I'm loving playing this game, and the physical results, win, lose, or whatever, will be what they'll be later, but the results I'm experiencing right now, I'm loving this. That, to me, is the whole point of the exercise.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's the joy of playing the game. You could say, if we're putting it in a game sense,
right? I mean, somebody might argue and say, yeah, but it does matter whether you win or lose. Well, of course, obviously. However, there's many layers to that. Let's say you win. Great. What did we do right? Let's remember that and do it again. If we lost, what did we do that caused us to lose? Let's learn from that and make a change. Either way, there's some learning, some growing, enjoyment that's happening.
Well, and there's been sports psychology is one of the first areas I think that really took us into some of these ideas of visualization and projecting ourselves into the future and seeing ourselves doing it perfectly or whatever might be the case. But the other thing that was discovered along the way is that people who got into the joy of whatever the activity was, we're talking about sports, but it could be anything you're doing in your life, if we could bring one of our own authentic values into that moment and really be lit up and really enjoying it, what they realized was the brain then starts functioning at a higher level. The endocrine system is working at its peak, and you've actually increased the likelihood of your being more successful, or in the case of a game, winning, than if you're just, slaving your way through it, and so over-focused on winning that you lose the joy of it. Walter Payton, one of the all-time great NFL runners for Chicago Bears, used to talk about how much he enjoyed, as he called it, getting into the zone. Right, just getting into this space where the joy of running past people and dodging them and breaking tackles and so on was so enjoyable for him that he was just having a peak experience while he did it.
Well, I remember reading an article many years ago written by Bill Russell, famous basketball player, who spoke about the same thing, getting into the zone. And for him, it was a non-ordinary state of consciousness. It was amazing to read him talking about very esoteric things. But he described getting into the zone being the result of extreme exertion. He said it never happened at the beginning of the game. It always happened when he'd been racing back and forth up and down the court. He was exhausted. He was maybe spitting blood. He got very graphic about it. And then he described this breakthrough into a zone where he said everything slowed down. It was as if the game was in slow motion. He knew what was going to happen a split second before it happened. Who's going to pass the ball to who? He knew what the refs were going to do. And he said there was this feeling of peace and calm and deep joy. He said it happened rarely, but when it did, he felt that defined why he was playing. That was the result he really wanted, to have that peak experience.
That's remarkable. As you're saying that, I'm reflecting on martial arts. My brother was very involved in martial arts for years, in a ongoing practicing way. And his teacher, who'd come over from China originally to train the FBI, I think it was, and the CIA, and then decided his brother carried on with that, and he started his own personal private practice with people. But what he described is that one of the things of Kung Fu was his practice was learning how to achieve this non-ordinary state of consciousness where you could get in the zone at will, that you could really, as he described it, alter time. Slow things down. If you ever watched The Matrix, there's a scene where Neo is suddenly able to dodge bullets and so forth because he's slowed down time.
Right.
Now, we're not necessarily saying you have to be able to have that skill to have results now, but I love what you're saying. It's not just experiencing the notion of future success. It's experiencing the joy of doing whatever you're doing now.
Well, and the key here, the secret, which, once we get this, we're really liberated. The most empowering thing we can really understand and actualize as a new habit is it all depends on what we're bringing. I mean, in sports, they have that expression, bring it.
Right.
Are you going to bring it today? Which means showing up at your best. To realize that we experience what we express, that our circumstances and other people are not limiting us. They can limit us if we accept those limitations in a negative way. Now, a valid limitation, for instance, is if I want to drive on the freeway, I need a car. That's a limitation. But it's a good limitation because a car allows me to drive on the freeway. So there's always limitations, but within the limitations that are necessary, we are free to bring the experience that we'd like to be having. This is a huge distinction between using some kind of mental techniques like positive thinking or whatever to create some sort of experience. This is a fundamental mind shift that I show up in my circumstance and I bring what I would like to experience, and then I have the results of that to experience right now.
Well, and that's when we've talked about changing your story, flipping the script, as we call it. One of the essential questions is, how would I like this meeting or this relationship or the situation to be different? And the first question we ask then is, who do I need to be? How do I need to show up in order to increase the odds that that's going to happen? So we're talking about bringing it. And I saw an amazing piece of footage and a brief story on NBC News yesterday about Lindsey Vonn. She's just absolutely had some of the most catastrophic crashes on the slopes, talking about limitations, gravity, and a centrifugal force, right?
Right, and ice.
And ice, yeah. So here, it was assumed that she would never ski again after her last just terrible accident. So she decided she wanted one more season. She wanted to go, World Cup one more time. Now, what was remarkable was she skied an incredible run after the previous run, having had yet another really scary crash. She got up there, she put herself in there and went for it. Now, she came in third, so she won bronze right, at the World Cup. And what they were interviewing her, and she said, I put this right up there with my gold. Because for me, to be able to come back from what I came back from and throw myself into this and do the very best I could, to me was an ultimate victory.
Well, this is so important. I'm so glad you illustrated that story for us all, because it shows that the real reward is very personal. It's not so much the recognition by others. It's like, am I aware that I brought my best? Do I know that I gave 100, 110%, however you put it? When we have that feeling, then we can adjust to the results that we get physically. Like for her, she didn't win the gold medal. She won the bronze medal. If she had a different mindset, she might say, well, I failed because my goal was to win the gold and I only got the bronze. That was not her mindset. Her mindset was to bring her best, to come back from those injuries and to give her all. She succeeded at that. She achieved her vision, even though the world said, well, you just got bronze, you didn't get gold. For her, probably she would have preferred the gold, but it didn't lessen, from what I read, her sense of accomplishing her vision.
Yeah. The interesting thing, too, was this placed her as the second most winning skier of either gender in the world. Again, second, not first, right? One win away from being tied for first. And the person who historically had been first was there and greeted her. And again, seeing her face and the smile she had and the deep sense of satisfaction she had from having accomplished this, like you said, it wasn't how the world measured it. It was for her own experience. And so you were talking about bringing it and bringing 100%, 110%. And I know for some of us at different times, that can be like, man, I don't know that I can even bring 30%, right? Oh, yeah. So, the recognition, again, there are times when we can bring it, there are times when we can't. But one of the most vital ingredients for everything we talk about is having what we call a thriving buddy, or two or three.
Yes.
People who encourage us to check in, how are we doing, and to encourage us to bring our best and to help us figure out what might be in the way. Yeah. That's so essential to being able to create results now.
Well, it's especially essential in this world of increasing distractions, because we can stay occupied with one distraction after another forever. If we have a friend who is willing to help us do what Aristotle advised, I think it was Aristotle, made the difference in a fulfilling life. He said, the unexamined life isn't worth living. And we think about that. We're advising people to examine their lives. Now, if we have a friend who encourages us to do that, so that when they say, how you doing? It doesn't just mean, are you feeling okay? It means, how are you doing in your life? What are you examining? Is there something I can support you with? What a difference that makes.
Well, and to go hand in hand with that, I think we've all heard the flip side version of that the unlived life isn't worth examining.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So
as true.
Yeah, that willingness to say, what do I want to bring to today? Mm-hmm. What do I want today? What do I want to bring to this encounter I'm about to have? What do I want to bring to this phone call, or this walk with my dog? Whatever it might be, that willingness to be intentional, to not only project ourselves into the future to enjoy what a future achievement might feel like, but to actually enjoy the moment now.
Well, and the great secret that we discover when we do that is we're not just drawing on our own resources. We're tapping into a rich field of potential. This would be the topic for a whole other program here, and we're just about to end this one. But, it's fascinating. People who describe these non-ordinary states and achieving exceptional things, they will always give a nod to something mysterious. They tapped into something beyond their own willpower. It wasn't just willpower, and the act of using the imagination to focus intention, to draw on the desire to achieve something, gets us into a whole range of life, which I think is really what those sages are pointing to when they say you need to examine your life.
Right. Well, it's as always, we love to hear your stories. So if you've got stories about an examined life or a great experience or results now, write us at thrivinginbusinessandlife@gmail.com. I'm Christopher Harding.
And I'm Will Wilkinson. We love talking with you every week like this, and it's always a thrill to hear back from you. So please be in touch, and we'll talk to you again next week.